All right, welcome back to Straight Axle Dubs. I'm Axel with my dad Mark, and we're going to go over some of the things that you should have with you or be ready for on a road trip in your VW. What's the first up on our list there, Dad?
Let's see. Have a spare accelerator cable.
So your accelerator cable is obviously what controls your throttle. If that breaks, you can't drive your car, basically. And there's ways to patch it, and you can do some things to get on the road, like
You could wire it open to a certain speed or something, but you're not really going to get through your gears, and you're not going to be able to shift.
Yeah, and like on my car, I broke it, and I have dual carbs, so it made it probably easier. I just turned the idle up to where I could idle at home, and that's first and second gear, so I was maybe 15 miles an hour max, but at least it was being able to avoid calling a tow truck.
Next thing on the list is the spare clutch cable. Yeah, if you lose your clutch cable while you're driving, or it starts to fray and stretch, maybe you can tighten it up a little bit, but you probably can't get under the car good enough to do it on the side of the road without having a decent jack.
Yeah.
You're gonna have to take the pedal assembly out to get it in there, but you can crash shift it. Just slamming it in gear. Obviously not in first gear. Put it in first gear. Start the car while it's in gear, assuming it's a flat or preferably a downhill surface, and then you can kind of find your way to hit your usual RPMs and pull it out of gear. Try to drop it into gear about 2,500 RPMs, I think, and that should be able to drop into like a second gear, and then the same going to third and fourth.
Right.
But having the clutch cable, you could just change it out right there. Especially if you're on a road trip with a bunch of VW guys, it's a kind of a celebration where you get to all hang out and help each other.
Like a NASCAR pit crew.
Yeah, NASCAR pit crew that doesn't want to work.
Which, talking about changing the clutch cable, on this car, that's stock height. So you could probably, if you had to get under there, it might be easier. But like the 64 here is pretty low, so that might be a bit more of a challenge. Of course, if you have a jack, that's going to be easy. But and also going along with that, having a jack takes up a lot of space too. So
right.
In a Bug, you're kind of limited. Whereas like in the van again, we can just tuck it under the seat or in one of the storage areas.
Right. And on a Bug, if you use the jack that came with it, you're going to want to find something to put the car on while you're under. You don't want to be under the car with just that jack.
Yeah. Or with any jack.
Yeah. Especially that one from the stock one. You want to pile up some rocks and set the car down on that or something.
A spare tire.
You'll need to take that wheel off to get to your clutch cable easily. At least the back end of it, the clutch. And then that's kind of thing where you'll probably need a vice grip, or you can use a spoke tightener for a motocross bike. I've used that before. That's pretty handy. Just slip that on there because it's pretty small, and you can kind of turn it in.
And adjust it.
Yeah, right in place while you're holding on to that little wing nut, and you kind of roll it and then turn it and roll it and turn it and roll it and turn it.
Right.
Get it off the sweet spot and then turn it towards the sweet spot and then do it again and do it again and do it again.
And one more thing with that, if your clutch cable breaks at the back, it's happened before, it hadn't happened to us, the piece with the wing nut can fall out. So carry a wing nut, or, if you're close to a hardware store, Home Depot, Lowe's, or Ace, wherever, if you can get something, or a pair of vice grips to have on the new cable to hold it in place, because otherwise you can install a new clutch cable, but you won't be able to go anywhere with it because you won't have the nut to hold it on.
Right. Yeah, and I believe that's an M8 by 1.25 thread. So if you have the nut, you could probably steal the nut somewhere else off the car, and possibly a washer that you'd be able to get you home.
Sandwich it.
Yeah, so you can get another wing nut. A spare tire. You need one of those?
Probably. Let's
wait, you don't have one.
Right. Well, I don't, but spare tire, at least on a Bug, it's always right here under the hood. This is super dirty. This one's a bit low. Okay. That's another thing to check is make sure your spare has air in it, because if you have a flat and your spare doesn't have any air, then you're double screwed. Yeah. And this spare is a bit old. You can kind of see, but it's more of a thing where you're not using that tire for a long amount of time. You're just getting off the side of the road, you know, because you don't want to blow a tire on a highway and having to limp it off the highway on a shredded tire, because then you can ruin your rim, or on a bus it'll sling and ruin the quarter panel and a bunch of other things, which we talked about that VW original jack. That's what this one looks like. Of course, we don't use it. You know, if we have a blowout, it's bring a jack and a lug wrench, which that's another thing, which we don't have one in this car, but we do in the 64 or the Vanagon. Just have a lug wrench with you, you know, 19, 21. They have, you know, the tire irons, I believe are what they called, have 4 different sizes. So 19, 21, and maybe 18, or, you know, other sizes. But, you know, making sure you have one to take a tire off. And along with that too, if your VW has the stock hubcaps, you need something to be able to pull those off.
I make those out of a piece of wire. Here's the one I have, and so it's just a piece of wire bent with a couple hooks on it.
So
can you see it?
And
you put the hooks in the.
Yeah, I'm not going to pull it off, but
hubcap like that.
Yeah, and then you pull it.
Both hooks in there and yank it off.
And you can change your
If
tire.
your spare doesn't have all the hubcap keeper things, at least for the early ones. For the wide 5s, then don't put the hubcap on. You'll
lose it. Right. So. And then while we were looking under the hood, I saw spare belt. Alternator or generator, there are different sizes. An alternator is a little taller than a generator.
Here's you can't even read the Continental number that was on that.
I believe it's in.
So this is still the Conti belt. It is. It's a 11.3
by 912.
Yeah,
which about right. I actually recently went through a bit of a debacle trying to put a belt on the 64 because it's a generator, and the part number that we had for the old one was the same, but AutoZone had changed their belts, so it wasn't. And then always also check how tight your belt is. It's kind of hard to do with one hand, but you can see like a little bit of slop. And you don't want it too tight, because if your belt is too tight, it will it'll eat up your pulley, it'll eat up the bearings in your alternator or generator, and then it can cause other problems. And, you know, if you lose your belt, you shouldn't be driving your car, because not only do you lose your charging, so you'll kill your battery, but
lose all cooling.
You'll lose your cooling. You wouldn't want that to happen even on a stock motor, or, you know, something as, I say pretty, but as dirty as this nice little Gene Berg motor in this car. What do we got next on our list?
Fuel pump, carburetor, or
fuel line.
Or fuel line.
Of course, that's a lot. That can go into many different conversations. You know, yell at us about where the fuel filters are placed or whatever. But
it's got 2 of them, so it's extra filter.
You know, carry a couple of line. You know, of course, this is kind of not a bad example, but this is a different example because this car is dual carbs. But if we go back to the 64, you'll see the, you know, it's just loop. It's a loop. Then we got the metal line from the back coming up to the filter, then into the pump, and then into the carb. So at least carry a spare piece of, you know, not an exact length. You know, you can always carry.
You can cut it to what you need.
Yeah, cut it. You know, you buy it by the foot at any auto parts store, and you just cut it to fit. You know, you can cut it with a pocket knife.
Or if the line that is leaking or has developed a leak, it typically happens at one of the connection ends. So maybe you can shave off a 1/2 inch there and put it back on. And just reclamp it. That'd be suggested, as opposed to trying to replace the whole line, or a large chunk of line at one time.
Right.
Just because you can get to it quicker on the road, slice the piece off. In fact, I've done it on this car before. It was running really bad. I opened it up. Top of the carburetor was all wet, which was odd, because gases usually goes in the carburetor, not out of the carburetor.
Right.
It goes out the bottom, but yeah.
And going on with that, a fire extinguisher too. Like, you know, you caught that carb leak, but if you hadn't have caught that, and that would have gotten onto the coil or the distributor or something electrical, you know, that's a fire, and then you lose your car. So always carry a fire extinguisher. And another thing with those is make sure it's in date. That's something people don't check a lot.
At least in the green zone.
In the green for the pressure. Another thing, like a lot of people do blaze cuts, which is the little like a kind of like a hose that
Fire suppression system.
Fire suppression. So if the temperature gets above the desired setting, it pops, and there's like a flame retardant that puts out the fire, or at least helps to slow it. Which y'all saw that recently on the March trip, if I remember. Yeah, and
there's a fire extinguisher right
yeah,
there.
right there, and always
Next to starting fluid. So start a fire and put it out.
Which, another thing, make sure your fire extinguisher is easy to get to, because you don't want to be trying to reach around for it, you know, behind the seat in a bug. As you're getting out, you can reach behind the seat, grab it, get out, pull the pin, stop your fire. What's up next?
Ignition system. You need, like, especially if you're running Petronics. This car is a good example. It was running a Petronics and it died. And I happened to have a distributor that was already set up with points, and plugged that in, and off I went.
Right.
You know, of course, you know, if it's a bug, you can have a distributor that is already timed
And set
with the clamp, and then take the 13mm bolt off the clamp and pull the whole thing out with the clamp in place.
Might be harder to show on this.
Yeah, that's actually a funky clamp.
Which you can kind of see it, that, you know, right under the fuel hose. But yeah, like,
you see it right here. Well, there's a clamp right here.
Yeah.
So this part you don't mess with,
because that'll adjust your timing.
Unbolt it back there, and
you just pull the whole distributor. And
yeah.
I had one, which is now in the Vanagon, but I had it set. It was timed, so I run Petronics, but I had a spare 009 with points in it, to where if that module failed, I just, you know, and actually I had to do it once. I had to, you know, just pulled over, put the engine on TDC, which, if your distributor is already timed, isn't as important, but always do it when swapping a distributor, just to be safe. Yeah. Just pull it, set it, and then.
Or you can also pay attention to where you're when you're pulling your distributor out, and notice where your rotor is pointing, and put the other one in the same way.
Right. And one thing that kind of bit me once is I had a distributor fail with the Petronics, and I put a .09 in it, and the wires were in a different location. So I get it in and I get it running, and it's still running like crap. And so I'm kind of, you know, I'm beating my head against the wall. I get the car home. Dad walks out, and within a minute he's like, yeah, you put it in the wrong place, which, you know, you kind of like, you kick yourself about it, but then you're like, oh, you realize, you know, I kind of was, you know, not thinking that, which TDC on, you know, on pointed at number one. I always number my plug wires, which, you know, not everyone does, but I always do it just because it makes things easier.
See what I mean? Do with dots.
Like a paint pen or Sharpie.
You can put numbers on it, but, you know, if your handwriting's as ugly as mine is, you just want to put dots.
So, you know, you got 1, 4, 3, 2. So that way, if we had to swap that, and like number one can be pointing over here, on some it can be even over here. So you know where number one's pointing, so you can reorder your wires to fit everything right. And then I believe we shouldn't have too much else. What else do we have?
Yeah, so along with that, if you're running a point system, bring extra points and a metal file to file them, or a piece of sandpaper.
Right.
I prefer a file. They have ignition files, those little jeweler files that you can get. Those you can just kind of do it in place up and down, and blow it out with, you know, just blowing air on it as much as you can to get any metallic dust off of it. But yeah, if you're running points, you should keep an extra set of points, an extra condenser, and then cap and rotor.
Right.
You never know where those things are going to go out.
Talking about points, if you need to set your gap, you know, you can carry a set of feeler gauges or a credit card, matchbook, which no one has a matchbook anymore, but credit card, you know, your driver's license, business card. It's not going to be the exact width you're going to need, but it'll be enough to where you can get the car running. And of course, if you change your gap, you're going to have to set your dwell and your timing. But if you get it set to at least, you know, 14 thousandths, which I think is close to what these are. 16 is what the spec is, but you can always set it, and then, you know, like we said, once you're to a safer place, you can reset everything and get it good to go.
Yeah, if you got a dwell meter, you know, of course you can set it to like 48 degrees, 48 to 52
is the range on a Beetle.
And dwell is the time it's closed. So to increase the dwell, you shrink the point gap.
Right. So if you're trying to get it between 48 and 52, and let's say you're at 20 thousandths and it's at like 54, you want to, you can set it at 19 or 18, and
that's degrees, not thousandths, but yeah,
degree 1,000, yeah. So
it's how much of the time in the circle that the points are closed, which charges up the coil.
Right.
So
just charge, yeah, like we said, that's a whole other video. And then I think kind of the last thing we have here is
you might want to take some oil or some automatic transmission fluid, or a gas can. There's a lot of guys that we travel with that have a gas can on the roof. It's like, does your gas gauge not work?
Yeah, or like, we did a trip to New Mexico and we were in the mountains. So, if you had an issue running out of gas, you can at least get, 1 gallon of gas will probably get you
closer to the gas station.
Yeah. But like, going back to oil, of course, that's another big topic. Rotella T1 straight 30 weight.
It's got high zinc in it.
Which
the other bug's got
1540. Which people talk about oil. We run diesel oil, so like 1540 or stuff. Yeah. So just anything with a lot of zinc and additives, because these motors like to run hot.
Flat tappets and
flat tappets.
Yeah, that's right. Lifters. Yeah. The flat lifters on the flat cam, and you want that extra zinc in there to keep it slick. Right,
and you don't want to run too thin of an oil, especially because these cars also leak oil.
Yeah, and these cars run hotter than cars with radiators. So yeah, you definitely don't want to run this 5W something that you see that that the newer cars run. Right, and of course, if you walk in, like if you're on the road and you need oil, you can walk in a gas station. You probably won't be able to get any 1540 off the shelf. They might have 1030 or something a little thicker, or even worst comes to worst, the oil stabilizer, which you don't want to just replace your oil with. But if you're in a pinch, it might work to get you off the side of the road. And of course, if there's a bigger issue where you're losing oil, like if something happens to your case, or sump leak or whatever, then you're going to be going through a lot more oil. But on our last road trip, we did a valve cover gasket replacement on the road, and obviously we didn't have time to RTV it and let it dry, but we were able to solve the problem, at least in the temporary time. So
yeah, and those leak, of course a little bit of a drip is fine, but like if it's a thing where it's constant, like it's pouring oil out as the engine's running, that's something you don't want to deal with, because then you're gonna lose your oil. It's gonna smoke like crazy, because it's gonna your valve covers are right above your heads, which are right next to your exhaust, so that oil is gonna burn off your exhaust. It'll if it ends up smoking, or if it drips and doesn't end up burning, it'll get on the car behind you, and they might get all mad, because then their pretty white paint is not gonna be,
it's gonna be speckled.
It's gonna be speckled with some oil drops. But that's just a simple basic set of things. Of course, tools. You're gonna need a basic set of tools.
The idiot book has a good list of phase 1 toolkit or whatever. In this green bug, I carry a Leatherman, a couple screwdrivers, and a tiny crescent wrench, like tiny, like the ones that was like a keychain crescent wrench. But it'll get up to a 10 millimeter. Which is
if you're needing something bigger than a 10 millimeter on your Volkswagen on the road, then you've probably got a bit of a bigger problem.
Yeah.
And of course, another thing with tools, everything I carry, at least in my car, all fits in that suitcase. Of course, I can't fit a spare tire or a jack or anything in there, but I got sockets, wrenches,
and all the parts, the spare parts.
All the parts. So my clutch cable, accelerator cable, and everything I need to fix my car on the side of the road if I need it.
Yeah.
Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. I'll have some more stuff coming soon, especially on that car and this thing too. So stay tuned for that, and we'll catch y'all on the next one.